You're listening to That's What I Thought, a casual conversation about life, love, relationships, and the lessons we learn. Here are your hosts, Micah and Annette.
Welcome back to That's What I Thought. I am Annette.
And I'm Micah.
And we're excited to bring you some new content today. We've been thinking and planning on how we want to mix things up, make this more exciting. We love just talking to each other, but it's been a long time since we've recorded it. So we have been brainstorming, and we got some fun little segments for you in our new podcast format today as we continue to talk about life, love, and relationships. And so, yeah, you excited to dig in?
Yeah, I'm excited. So today we'll be talking about vulnerability in relationships. We're also outside on our front porch enjoying the beautiful weather.
So you're gonna get some trains, you get some birds, but it's about the aesthetic. It's like a ASMR.
Definitely about it. Today we're going to be starting off. We have some segments now. We're getting crazy with it. We're adding some stuff, trying to structure it a little bit more so it's a little bit more fun for us and most likely also for you guys. Our first one is a fun segment that I'm excited about. I've titled it "Let Me Guess." And it's where one of us will throw a topic or a question out there that they're curious about and want to know more about, and the other person has to take a guess at either answering it, whether we try to seriously answer it correctly or just have some fun with it. We're going to do that. And then the other one will actually look up the correct answer. And we'll see how we compare it. Via ChatGPT.
So to fact check our
Specifically,
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT will be our source.
Fat GPT.
Fat GPT.
I like that even more.
Chunky GPT. You got a question? I don't think of one.
You don't think one? I think I was thinking of one today. And it is, even though I've been to the plant before, it's how the waste center treatment processes your poo and then makes it into water.
I'm sorry, what?
In the waste treatment center.
Yeah.
Plant. It takes the sewage water and then it processes it and then it gives the regular water back.
It's not a question.
How does it work?
What? How does it work? Oh, well, obviously. Wait, so what is the question? Give me a question, not just a statement.
How does the waste... well, now I forget. Waste treatment center work.
I thought you specifically want to know about poop.
How does the water waste treatment center work?
How does the water waste treatment center work?
Yeah.
It's actually really funny. I have no idea. My guess is that it takes all the water, your poop goes into a poop chute, including all the water that it uses.
Is the poop chute just the toilet?
The poop chute is the toilet. It's also all the piping that goes from our toilet to the sewage center.
Okay, so we're assuming we're in the city.
Naturally, where else? Well, there would be water treatment. Yeah, but they wouldn't have water treatment. They would have poop tanks in their backyard.
Okay, well, I just wanted to specify. Yeah.
Or septic tank, if you will. So we're in the city because it has a water treatment plant.
Yeah.
So all the water goes straight to the plant, and the plant has like a sifter. It's kind of like photosynthesis.
Why is a sifter like photosynthesis?
It's just listen to it. Listen, okay? So it goes in there, it power washes itself at a high pressure, sends it into a large tank, and then from there, it gets cleaned out.
So are you saying the poop goes in through a power washer?
It goes in through a large filter.
Sprays it against the wall?
No, not exactly a power washer. Power washer like a hose, if you will.
Okay.
With a large filter on it.
Yes.
And so it's pumping out this large bit of water, filtering out as much of the chunkies and ickies as it can.
Chunkies.
And then once it filters that out, then you have at least liquid water. And so then it boils it all up and gets it all to evaporate into the air. And then
So it just evaporated the liquid and now you just have poop?
Now you just have poop on the ground. Does it clean that
and
up?
No water?
Well, all of it's in the evaporate. They don't. They evaporate into an evaporation tank.
The evaporated water got
which then I'm not sure what the process is to unvaporate things. To liquidate things.
Rain is the process.
Then they have an internal rain system.
There's an inside rain. Hold on, get this. There's an inside rainstorm. And then the lightning and thunder crash.
I see you making a joke about it, but this is what happens.
Okay.
This is reality. And then from there, you have clean water.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Let's see. I'll take my guess. Based on what I remember from having visited these places,
You don't have to guess.
I
You
want
can,
to.
You can just chat GPT it. I'm just saying that's how the segment works.
Well, I'm just saying that I
But
want to
no,
take
if
my
you want
guess
to take a
and
crack at it,
see
take a
how
crack
wrong
at it.
I am. I
I'll
feel
look
like
it up.
that's only fair. But my guess is, I think it comes in, like you said, through the poop chute.
Through the poop chute.
In the sewer systems in the city. Comes into the treatment center. And then there's different, like, holding areas, like kind of like the dolphin tanks at SeaWorld.
Exactly like that.
But there's no dolphins. And so it comes in, and there's an initial, like, filtering process. And then what's there gets, like, treated with chemicals and stuff, I think. And then it moves to another vat in a treatment process, and it just continues until you get the water.
All right, let's
How
see.
did you phrase the question?
All right, I phrased, how does a water treatment system make clean water? Do you feel good about that?
Treatment center.
Center, okay.
Because it's not just a system, it's the town.
No, you get it. I get that.
Yeah.
Center, make clean water.
Yeah.
So I have a question mark on there. ChatGPT gets confused. All right, sweet. This is really easy.
Okay.
A water treatment center typically uses several processes to make clean water. These may include filtration, which we were right, with the big power washer filter.
Okay, I don't know about the power washer.
Sedimentation, not sure what that is.
Sedimentation, that's when it settles at the bottom, right?
So basically evaporation.
Look up what sedimentation is.
Disinfection, often with chlorine or UV light. That's probably forgot. Did you say that?
I said that.
That's
Yeah.
because you're smarter than me.
Well, I said like chemicals or something.
And sometimes chemical treatment. Chlorine's a chemical.
Yeah.
Chemical treatments like, also this coagulation and a word I can't pronounce, to remove contaminants and impurities from the water. Each step targets specific types of pollutants and ensure the water meets safety and quality standards.
I need to know what the word you can't pronounce is, because my mind just fills it in with a blank like it was a swear word.
It's called like flocculation. Flocculation?
Flocculation.
What the flocculation? All right, sedimentation is a process in water treatment where suspended particles in water settle down due to gravity. It involves allowing the water to sit in a tank or basin for a period of time, during which heavier particles sink to the bottom, forming a sediment layer. The clarified water above the sediment layer is then removed for further treatment, helping to remove large particles and reduce, another word I can't, turbidity.
Yeah, I'm a scientist.
Which, like I said, it's basically the same thing as the evaporation process, is what I said.
Evaporation process. There's no rain cloud of water.
Yeah, but they're separating the liquid from the ickies, from the chunkies.
That is true. Yeah, you just didn't have the vehicle quite right, but you had the idea.
Yeah, I think we crushed it.
The more you know.
The more you know.
We thought one thing, but now we know another.
But now we know.
According to ChatGPT.
All right. That was segment number 1. I don't know how to transition.
Can't do that. Okay.
What do you want to do? You do it. Let me guess.
You can't just say that was segment number 1. It's like you're checking off a list.
It was.
That's not engaging.
We have another segment. All right, segment number 2.
You find a transition into the segment. You don't just go through the bullet points.
Well, I stepped up to the plate and I swung.
Okay.
All right.
Tell us what segment number 2 is.
Segment number 2 is called Oops Moments. Oopsie doopsies moments. This segment, you want to explain the segment?
No, because I don't know what you wrote.
I'm trying to remember what I wrote. It's essentially like even in our description of our podcast, we talk about my bad moments. And so it's essentially, we'll each share a my bad moment, specifically when it comes along with the lines of vulnerability.
Okay.
So now, do you have one?
I'm trying to think of a more serious one.
Or one where we were vulnerable or made a mistake, and it was a learning
experience. Like you made a mistake and owned up to it?
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, I've had lots of little ones at work where like I forgot a link or I had a typo or something like that. But then I sent out and then I want to justify that I was wrong. But then I'm like, you know what? It's just human error. And I got to accept that I'm a human and just apologize and do better next time.
I feel like there are times, I I think I was thinking specifically in the context of relationships, but even just in general, there are a lot of times where like I'll make a call, a decision, and then I'll be very adamant about the decision, and then eventually I'll be like, oh shoot, that was the wrong decision. And so there's a lot of people who would just brush it under the rug or try to convince somebody else that it was their decision or this, that, or the other. And so one thing that I try really hard to do is to own up to it and be like, this is a bad call. I made the wrong call. I apologize. Here's the correct decision or call to make or whatever it was. It happens a lot, especially with my job where I work with teens. But yeah, just in a lot of contexts like that where you just have to be, even if the person that it benefits drives you crazy, it's still better to just be vulnerable and say that was my bad and you were right and here's what I'm willing to do to make it right, which is another thing I feel like a lot of people miss that part of it. It's not just acknowledging that you did something wrong, it's about trying to correct the wrong too.
You give an example story.
Example story. Good question.
Always better with the story.
Yeah, okay. So talking about with teenagers. There was a time I brought a group of teenagers to an event with other teenagers from different sites. And some of the teenagers I knew already weren't going to get along super well. I'd already talked to them ahead of time multiple times. I'm like, hey, like, let's make sure, we're leaving these people alone. We're not causing a ruckus. We're not being jerks. We get there, and the teens are all sitting at a table, and I'm like helping set up something. And then one of them comes up to me and says, hey, Derek keeps calling me grandma. And knowing that she hates being called grandma, but she is a bit of, in her defense, she is a bit of a grandma. But just like,
so
it can
why
be,
don't you just own up to it? You're a grandma.
Yeah, she can just be like real, snooty and short with you, but then, she's got a lot of grandma
like a
characteristics. Kind of, no, like an old Karen.
Like a boomer Karen.
Just like crotchety, kind of like old people can be crotchety. Not all old people are crotchety, but because older people can be
Disclaimer,
crotchety.
we love old people.
Just imagine a crotchety old person, and that's this teenage girl. And so she usually struggles with it a lot. So I immediately my ears are already burning because I'm already annoyed because I've told these guys multiple times to leave her specifically alone. And so I get up, I'm all huffed and puffed. I call the three boys over that are doing it, and I don't lay into them, but I definitely I'm not a lay into you kind of person, but I pretty much laid into them more than I would most people because it was like strike 4, and I was done, and the date had just started, and so I laid into her for a while, and they were all just like super upset with me because they're like you're just making a decision, you're not getting all the information, like you just don't know, and I'm like guys, like this is a pattern, you guys do this stuff all the time, like this, and I was so ready to be done and not had listening ears on. And so then there's just something inside of me after the conversation where I was like, I feel like I should actually ask some more questions. And so then I called the boys back, asked them a couple questions of like trying to get them to share their side of the story, and their side of the story kind of lined up. And so then, or I felt like they were telling me the truth. And so then I asked the girl and a couple of the other people at the table like what actually happened, and found out that the boys didn't call her grandma. She just wanted them to leave her alone. Like they weren't doing anything. They were just nearby, making noise, like just hanging out with themselves, and that was annoying to her. So then she came up to me and said they were calling her grandma, which they had been doing on the car ride there, which is why I got after him already. She just did it so that way I would get them in trouble and get them to go somewhere else, which makes me look like a jerk because I was wrong. And so then I had to pull all three of them aside and be like, hey, like that was my bad. I made a bad call. I shouldn't have done that. I should have gotten all the information beforehand. Like, what can I do to make it right? And some of them were like, it's fine. Like, it's okay. No big deal. And some of them were like, yeah, I want you to do this for me. And I'm like, I can do. But now we're all good. But just one of those times where even though like I thought for sure I was right, and just because I was just so ready to be done with the situation that I wasn't using all of my listening skills and doing my due diligence. So then I was making a call that affected people.
So you're talking about vulnerability just in the sense of owning up to something and saying my bad.
In that sense, yeah. I mean, we can talk about anything, but if you want to talk about that form of vulnerability.
Yeah, I think in that sense, that extreme ownership kind of idea. I haven't read that book. Have you?
Extreme ownership?
Yeah.
I've not, but I've watched the TED Talk on it
Oh, okay. I
from
don't
one
know.
Jocko Willink.
I don't know the exact points, but that concept of just like taking ownership of whatever's going on, like whatever part you played in it, even if it really wasn't all your fault, just being the mature enough person to apologize and have egg on their face and look a little foolish instead of following your sin nature or your animal nature to like want to justify and defend yourself and be like, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong and blah blah blah, but to like own up to it. Yeah, I think it's cool. And to the point of where you're saying the boys wanted different things in like restitution, like Gary Chapman. It's Gary Chapman, right? Who did the 5 love languages?
Yes.
Also has like the languages of apology. I looked at that briefly, but it was interesting to just kind of like see the different way people like want restitution. And like you said, I think it's good to know that and offer it, even if it's not like something that is requested necessarily. Because I think he broke them. I'm not going to remember them all perfectly, but one was like apologizing, just saying I'm sorry to them, and one was like saying I'm sorry in like a public space and like owning up to something you did publicly, giving a gift of apology, or I guess I can't remember the other ones. I think there's 5 of them, but yeah, that idea of like maybe giving a hug, like different people want restitution in different ways. But yeah, I mean, you only even get to that point if you're willing to say, I'm going to own up to whatever part I had in this, even if it's just like sin of omission. Like I didn't do anything and maybe I should have said something. I think even like asking people if you hurt their feelings or if there's something going on that you're upset with them, like opening up that door for that conflict feels scary because it could like trigger your like fight or flight, and being able to say like, oh, I have the emotional wherewithal to own up to something and seek reconciliation and move on without making it a me statement, like, oh, now I'm such a horrible person, I'm not good enough, I'm whatever those like grand sweeping statements you want to apply to yourself, like being able to put those in perspective and just say like, let's just deal with the problem right here and not make it bigger than it is, and just say like, all right, like I'm a human and he's a human or they're a human and we're gonna rub against each other. And so like, not in a sexual way, but maybe if you're married. But just opening up the door for those conflicts, because then I think maybe you'll have more small conflicts, but then when the big ones come, you know you have the relational capital to handle them.
Yeah. Plus, like I found, I mean, vulnerability. I say this pretty often. I don't remember where I got it from. Vulnerability breeds vulnerability.
You got it from me.
Is it you?
Like all great quotes.
Did you say that?
Yes.
Or did you get that from somebody? I thought you got it from somebody.
All ideas are stolen. I mean, I'm sure it was influenced by somebody.
But anyway,
but it was
just that idea
that
of
was like when I first moved here.
Yeah, it was great, and I loved it, and I thought it was great, and so I still use it because Annette's brilliant. If you don't know this about Annette, but vulnerability breeds vulnerability, and so I mean, the more vulnerable you are, the more vulnerable the safer somebody feels to be vulnerable themselves, and they're like, oh, it's okay to not be perfect, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to have faults, and so it's okay to share those too. I'm a big fan of vulnerability breed vulnerability, but also like in that same vein, it builds trust too, especially when trust is broken, to be able to own up, that idea of extreme ownership of like, this was on me, and I'm bringing it to you, and I'm genuinely apologizing and being specific as to what I did wrong, what was wrong, and that like in that situation I had broken the trust with that group of teen boys after I just dismissed them, and it was like, stop it, after the grandma had come up to me. So then I knew that when I brought it up, I'm like, I need to be intentional with this apology, and which is why I was like, I'm gonna offer like, is there anything I can do, like say like what, like some embarrassing I can do, like these kinds of things, just so that they knew that I was being serious and I was really intentional in making sure I said I was sorry, not just saying my bad or just saying like, sorry that happened,
I'm sorry that you feel that way.
Yeah, saying that I'm sorry that I did this,
Mhm.
taking ownership of what you did, because it fixes, not fixes, but it helps mend broken trust,
Mhm.
because now they can trust me to, if I do make a mistake like that, I am going to own up to it.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of adults in their lives, especially in the lives of teenagers, that don't do that.
Or just leaders in general. In
That's
your
true too.
workplace, if you have a leader who doesn't own up to anything,
Yeah.
your trust level is like, which feels like antithetical, because I feel like as a leader, you want to be like, I never make any mistakes and everything is fine. But like, actually, like you said, that's not reality. We actually build trust when we see somebody else be a human and take ownership of that and be
Yeah.
like, yeah, I messed up.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time in work settings. I mean, that's what like the Jocko Willick's idea of extreme ownership is in. It's in a leadership position. The situation that he gives is there's this really big. He was overseeing a mission, and within that mission, there was a bunch of like there's a lot of crossfire and like friendly fire was happening, and so he had like this big meeting, and he went through like each guy and was like, whose fault is this? And there were a lot of them were like, it was my fault or it was his fault, or and at the end of it, he's like, no, it was my fault. He's like, because I'm in charge of this, so all of this reflects onto me. So this is my fault because I didn't train you well enough. I didn't do this well enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which I thought was, I love that. And I was like, man, I wish more people, especially people in leadership, responded that way. Because he was getting court-martialed, and because he took extreme ownership, they dismissed it. I'm pretty sure he was court-martialed. Go watch the TED Talk or read the book because you'll
Confirm the fact.
to confirm the story facts. But the reasoning of it is accurate. I'm a huge fan of it. I think the more vulnerable you can be, or at least in the sense of the more transparent you can be as well, I think the better leader you'll be, the better husband you'll be, the better wife you'll be, the better friend you'll be.
Yeah, when I toss a question your way, I
Mm.
feel like what I've been learning about men, especially in the example of Adam, is that like for most men, there's like a sin stronghold of passivity and inaction. So when it like comes to owning up in vulnerability and leadership, especially in a culture is rebelling against the toxic masculinity motif. How do you live as a man who is vulnerable with ownership and passivity? I feel like they could almost be opposites.
Can you ask that again?
How do you live as a man?
How do I live as a man?
Yeah, period.
It's pretty.
Did you breathe?
Just wake up, go about my day,
No, how do you
be standing up.
how do you be vulnerable when your temptation is passivity, but you want to practice ownership,
What do you mean by passivity?
like inaction, like just standing by while things happen?
I feel like not a lot of men are the passivity type.
I don't think that's true.
I think that's true. But I think passivity isn't the right word then.
Maybe we have different definitions. I would define passive as, I'm thinking of the example of Adam and Eve. Like Eve is in the temptation and taking the fruit, and Adam's just standing there, just watching instead of making any commentary or stepping in. And I think so now, like, I think that's like a generational sin stronghold thing, kind of like an original sin thing. And I think a lot of guys, like, even when I think of like the fatherhood crisis, I think a lot of it is rooted in passivity, which can be rooted in like selfishness or whatever, of just like, I'm going to sit by, I don't want to stir the boat, I'm going to let the wife do these things, I'm going to.
So what's the question?
So the question is, you're talking about taking ownership and this extreme ownership idea and how you like that idea. And I think there are men, not to say that there aren't women, but there are men who like resonate with the idea and like the idea of it, but wrestle with the passivity of like, I don't know how to engage this thing that's happening that I could have ownership of.
It's still not a question.
These are all questions.
Those are not questions. Those are long concepts.
Because you keep asking me what the question is, so
Yeah,
I keep
then
trying to tell you what the question
yeah, but you make it longer every time. Ask me one specific question, 5 words.
What does vulnerability look like when you struggle with passivity?
Just vulnerability. I just don't think that they're opposing things.
Okay, so more about that.
I think that's probably where I'm most confused. Because I feel like being vulnerable isn't the same, or isn't the opposite of being passive, at least in the sense that you're talking about passivity. where you just kind of stand by, because I feel like vulnerability and action are two different things. Vulnerability is more like a response, I would say, maybe, probably not even that. I would say they're two separate things: vulnerability and action and passivity.
Okay.
But I feel like I do agree that there's a lot of passivity, especially in a lot of men today, myself included, where it's easier to not than it is to do. Just like, especially culturally, that's just a lot of where most people are, where it's just like, I'm gonna worry about me, I'm gonna just mind my own business, keep my nose to the ground instead of like speaking up and standing out. And I think that's where a lot of us men fall short of like our full potential, and something I'm guilty of and wrestle with a lot. I want what's easy instead of what's best. Now, as a man, especially a Christian man who's trying to lead his family, it's important that I don't just do that. That I'm being intentional with my decisions, and I'm not just stuck in the decision making mode. That I'm actually in the action phase too, and so making decisions and then acting on them. Because I feel like a lot of men, especially like when we talk about the fatherlessness epidemic, where it's easier to just walk away, to disappear, to pay child support than it is to actually be a dad. And especially in a world where men are looked down on these days, and single motherhood is praised and is amazing, and which, like, it is super hard. It's hard to have, two-parent house. So I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be a single mom. But just know that, like, a kid, boy or girl, needs a mom and a dad in the house, and whatever that looks like, uncle who's there all the time, or whatever. But they need somebody to look up to, both sides. Like, men need to know, need to learn how to express being physical, and to learn restraints, and that's typically something that they learn with dad at a young age, when they're play wrestling and fighting and tossing each other around. They build this knowledge of themselves and their own limitations, and a lot more than they do with mom, where mom is much more of the nurturer. And we watched a video yesterday where kids go to dad for fun, and they go to mom to moan and groan, and because mom will fix things and dad will have fun. But it's really what it is, they learn different things from different genders. And so, like, with dad, you're learning how to be physical, how to be fun, how to express yourself, and you always just kind of inherently look up more to dad. And so you seek dad's approval more than you seek mom's approval, which is why it's probably easier for you to bring negative things to mom than it is to dad. At least that's how it was for me. And so, yeah, I don't know. I didn't really answer your question.
Yeah, I think you said it's easier to not.
Yeah.
And I was trying to relate that to earlier when you said, even in your example with the teens, of like the temptation was to not engage and just not say anything and just move on.
Yeah.
And I was saying
Okay.
it takes more vulnerability to engage, to be present.
Yeah.
And like even like the fatherlessness is an example of that. Like it's harder to be present, which that vulnerability and presence I think are kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Now I understand what you're saying. I thought you were like pitting them against each other, but it's more like you lack vulnerability when you are being passive, because there is no even in the context of what I said, there was no vulnerability unless I was willing to take the action to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a big thing with a lot of men. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, so like in relationship with my dad, with most mentors I have, with most leaders, since most leaders are men, where yeah, there's just a lot of that inaction to being vulnerable and say that I made a mistake.
Mhm.
It's a lot easier to just be like, whatever, like just suck it up, or just sweep it on the rug, or blame it on somebody else, because it's just easier than taking the blame yourself, because then it hurts your ego and your pride, which are both negative things in the eyes of the Lord. And so the more vulnerable you can be, the more often you choose to be vulnerable, the easier the choice becomes, and the better leader you become.
Mm-hmm.
Both in any situation, even in like a relationship, the better your relationship becomes, the more often you're willing to be vulnerable. Because like there's also a lot of guys who just like keep everything inside. They don't share anything.
Yeah.
And so like being able to share things isn't bad, isn't girly, isn't negative. It's always, every single time I've been vulnerable with something, about something, with someone, the relationship or the situation was always better because of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really hard to ignore that little voice in your head that says, otherwise. So it says this is a dumb decision. You should blame it on somebody else. You should, if they find out it's true, then they won't respect you. Just all these little voices that go off in the back of your head that keep you from making the best decision, which is to always be vulnerable, because that's just how it is, and that's what God calls us to be. I mean, even they were hiding from Him, and He knew exactly what they did, and He gave them the opportunity to share what Adam and Eve did. Can't remember exactly what they chose. What did they choose?
What, when they hid?
Yeah, you said, where are you hiding?
And they said, we hid from you because we're naked.
Okay, good. Yeah, so they did say. My brain was like, I don't know. But yeah, but like God wants you to be honest and be open, and because He knew exactly why they were hiding, but He knew it'd be better for them to share it themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm getting, even from this conversation, that new insight that vulnerability is really intrinsically linked to presence, like you showing up. And it's across the board. I mean, I'm kind of picking on guys, but it's across the board, because like, even when I think of other examples, like when it comes to presence, like showing up at the gym to work out, it takes vulnerability to show up there, especially when you haven't been there, because like oh, I'm gonna look dumb, or I don't know what I'm doing, or all of these things. Or I mean, same could go for like showing up at church, like I don't want to go, I'm gonna look dumb. And that's not to be like in a legalistic sense there, but I think, yeah, even like Adam and Eve, hiding is the opposite of being present, is the opposite of vulnerability.
Yeah.
I guess I was only picking on guys only because that's more of a stereotypical response. And even like with most women I know, I think because we are more geared to like that verbal exchange face to face, like that presence comes easier too. So like if I'm throwing a party, the girls are always the ones who are responding and being like, we'll be there, or we'll do this, or we'll bring this. Just anytime that I do any sort of planning for anything, I guess that 80-20 rule, like 80% of the responses are going to be the girls, and I might hear from 20% of the guys. It's like there's just a lot more of that presence. I'm going to expose myself and make myself vulnerable in order to be in this relationship, because the vulnerability is just, it's all relational. I mean, if you don't have anybody, you don't have to be vulnerable. So.
But the odds of you not having anybody in any situation is like 0%.
Yeah.
And so, because you have coworkers, most people have family.
Even if you're on a
friends.
deserted island, you still have your relationship with God that you're like practicing your vulnerability with.
You're more vulnerable.
Yeah, so I think vulnerability is presence and showing up and being it. It's tied to conflict because you're willing to take that risk to enter that relationship, even if there's conflict. So
beautiful.
Good thoughts, babe.
Good thoughts. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's good enough for today, I'd say. If you, as a listener, would like to share your own stories of being vulnerable, or just in general personal growth, ways you've learned something new, or said my bad, or
what you think about vulnerability connected to presence,
or how you thought water treatment systems work. Feel free to reach out. Annette, where do they find that information?
Well, if you're listening on Spotify, there's places to like respond on there if you want to talk, or you can send a email to that's what I thought podcast@gmail.com.
Yes. We have fun ideas for different segments moving forward, and one of them that I would really like to do is listener input, and so like to share some of those stories, and whether it's
or answer some
questions. So if you have stuff, let us know. We're happy to hear it. What's going on in our lives these days?
Chilling like a villain.
My
birthday's tomorrow.
Nat's birthday is, well, I guess at this point it would be 2 days ago. Yes, this past 30. Saturday. Yes.
30 and flirty.
30 and flirty. All right, that's everybody. Appreciate you guys. Bye.